age. An old book published in the 70s that influenced me a great deal, and you'll see some overlap with NLP as well, is The Psychology of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden, who introduced me to NLP back in the late 70s. Nathaniel is a psychologist from California, originally born in Canada. He was first known for his association with Ayn Rand. And they had a subsequent parting of ways that was very dramatic back in the 60s. And he went on to become quite a prominent psychologist, still is, writes lots of books. Psychology of Self-Esteem is one of his earliest. The other one that I like a lot is The Disowned Self. And it flows nicely into what we're going to be doing today. The disowned self is about the ways in which we disconnect from parts of ourselves as we grow up in order to survive. And it was one of the first books about codependence. It was never called codependence, but it was about those missing parts of ourselves. And how, when we disconnected from them, we stunted them. They got stuck. They didn't evolve with us. They got left behind. And about his work with people, reclaiming them. And in advanced studies on neurolinguistic programming, you'll see that work done as well. Can't think of anything else right now. Are there any questions or comments about yesterday? Anything you noticed last night happening? You had study groups last night. Comments, suggestions, questions? No?
Just that this has been very, very useful. We were talking a little bit this morning that I like the idea of asking for positive intention. Mm-hmm. There's something we were talking about, like the swish pattern. Mm-hmm. If you don't know what you're swishing away and what its use is for, then I don't know. But
yeah. One of the things that I like about positive intention, before any of those dramatic change patterns, putting that in there, is that you do capture something very important for the person. You don't want to create a disowned part. Yeah. You want to give it a job to do, so it's part of you. You don't want to become empty of parts of you.
In that same vein, when you can accept those parts of you and understand where they came from, mm-hmm. and that it was not anything badly intended, it was a way to cope, then it's much easier to say, okay, well, I've got this, and then move on, as opposed to, I've got to clean this up before I can move on.
Yes.
And there's a freedom, there's a great freedom in the aha moment where you can go, okay, I get it. Yeah, that's right. But I don't have to go back and understand it at a deeper level. I can just accept it and move on. Mm-hmm. And that's profound. It's less intimidating. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
It's not going to be, and I think so many people don't want to do therapy and everything because they think, oh my God, it's going to take 20 years and it's going to be dredging up all of this misery and sadness. But in fact, this is a beautiful way to be able to handle it mm-hmm. and move on very rapidly.
Yeah, you don't have to relive the whole thing.
Right.
And you also don't have to be afraid that there are going to be parts of yourself that you might not like.
Right.
And so if you can learn about them and accept them, it makes you more whole instead of more empty. So it's bringing them along, and they're resources that you will always use. Yeah. As we touched on yesterday, whenever there's incongruence, you can pretty much guess that there is more than one part involved in your thinking about this situation. And we've started talking about parts. We're using that word. Well, parts is a noun that describes a lot of process and activity and concept that in one word has difficulty capturing it all. But it's a term that we use. I've had people say, well, if we start to articulate parts, does that mean that we are ill in that we have a multiple personality or something? There's theory, and I don't believe it always, but there's theory that psychologists or psychiatrists actually create multiple personalities in people by accessing them and pulling them out, and not helping people understand that they're just an aspect of personality. There's another theory that multiple personalities develop as strong separations from the human when there's trauma, a lot of trauma, torture, I mean really bad stuff in childhood, so that the different parts that come forward and disconnect from the core self are the coping mechanism, and they take over. And I've actually seen this, and it happens rarely. It's in extreme cases of torture usually, and these selves can be worked with, their positive intention found, their evolution encouraged, and then they can be reintegrated into the core self. So it's really nothing to fear. It's something to be interested in. No one here has multiple personality. Like I said, I probably have seen it once in my entire career, and it's fascinating. But we all have different aspects of ourselves that are influencing us at all times. My grandmother is with me, sometimes more consciously than others. Sometimes she comes in my dreams. Sometimes I hear her speaking through my voice. I go, oh my God, where did that come from? That's Grandma. Sometimes it's my little girl. When I was talking the other day about my temper tantrums, if I get really angry, if I'm not getting what I want, if I let myself be aware of what's going on, it's the 6-year-old, and she's throwing a temper tantrum. I was disconnected from my sister for quite a few years, and when we reconnected and got together again, I was following her on some errands, and I was watching her across the room moving, and I got really scared because I could see in her movements me, and that frightened me, and I had to do some work around that to re-own that part of me and not be afraid of it. Our parents are parts of us. They're in there. They speak through us. Our different people in our culture and extended family are with us. We have younger parts, the 6-year-old, the baby, the teen, the 20-year-old, all are there. We also have older parts, parts who are evolved beyond where we are now. And they're there to guide us. These are all concepts, useful concepts. When you future pace something or do the swish, you have created a part of yourself that is a resource to you. That part hopefully will keep growing and always be in front of you, guiding, leading the way. You might have an aspect to your present that is there with you that no one else knows about. There might be the artist part of you that you kind of keep hidden, or the part that speaks up and says what needs to be said without consideration of what's appropriate. There's the sexual part of us many repress and put away. The angry part of us. All of those aspects to our personality are useful. If we acknowledge them, care about them, have compassion for them, own them, and help them evolve, they become a resource to us. If we lock them up, tell them they're bad, they become demons with which we have to deal. And those demons will pop up in unexpected places. You go, whoa, where'd she come from? And that might or might not be useful. So today we're going to invite those parts of ourselves in a situation to present themselves, find a way to communicate with them, find their positive intention, and help them evolve. So parts are represented visually. Remember yesterday when we had one part in one hand and one part in the other? They will often have temperature, so you have a kinesthetic feeling. One hand might be cool, one hand might be warm. They might have a tingling or a numbness, a heaviness or a lightness. If you allow yourself to notice, you'll get differences. They have a visual aspect often, if you allow that especially. They'll show up in a form. Sometimes they will look like someone we know, or a cartoon character, or perhaps an inanimate object like a rock or a cloud. They have voice, they have the auditory aspect. They speak to us. All of these aspects to parts of our personality also have a spatial aspect. Remember I said yesterday in our mind field, we place them. And when people talk about different aspects to a situation, they will gesture to where that aspect of themselves exists in their mind field. And it's very, very interesting. Where that part exists can be useful or not useful. Very often we have parts of us that behave in ways that are unuseful, that are right in our face, and prevent us from moving forward. If we can acknowledge them, move them into a space where we can communicate with them, find their positive intention, help them grow up or connect with other parts of us, whatever needs to happen, and move them somewhere aside so that we have a clear field here, they can then become resources. So, are there questions or comments or noticings as I talk about this? Does it ring true to you in noticing parts of yourself? Yeah? Yeah, Gary.
I'm curious about talking about parts of ourselves and then talking about them as they.
In
and
what
seems
makes
dissociated from being ourselves.
Well, and sometimes, and at the beginning of this, it is useful to dissociate from them. So thanks for bringing that up. In order to, remember you talking earlier about standing back and looking at a system, that's what we're doing. The system being us. And there are many parts of us influencing who we are. In order to understand them, it helps often to dissociate from them. So in Buddhism, you talk a lot about how to have compassion for your own feelings and your own thoughts. in order to have compassion